impromptu, but I heard some information today, and it goes on a story that I talked about a little while ago. This is definitely something that you're going to want to hear. Now, first off, how you doing? Do you guys know about this case, DB Cooper? Well, if you don't, there's a huge story about DB Cooper. But I have a question. Did the FBI just crack this case? Well, if you want to know more, stick about. I'll tell you a little bit about some of the stuff that's going on that may, in fact, let us know that DB Cooper actually may have been discovered. There's information that says potentially that DB Cooper may have just been found out. I'm going to shift this camera over just a little bit real quick and make sure that I can see this. So I'm going to go ahead and dig into this. I'm going to start looking at this. Hey, Steve, looking for silver. How you doing? So if you guys remember, back in January of this year, there was a story about DB Cooper. Now, DB Cooper, Thanksgiving Eve, 1971, took his tie off, threw it in a seat, put on a parachute with $200,000 worth of cash, and then jumped back out of the back of a plane and disappeared into the history books and into American lore forever. Well, 52 years later, they looked at this tie and then they found some stuff. So since January, they've been looking at this. Now, people have sued the FBI to try to get some information to try and dig into. Uh, didn't know he was lost. That's funny. Um, Trying to dig into the story more, right? Because what they had found is they had found DNA evidence on this particular tie that tied them to somebody. Well, they kind of just went on and they kind of talked and talked and talked and talked and talked. But today, a story dropped. Now, the story dropped, there's a couple different places. All is the information where I've got this down below. But I'm basically going to be reading you this article. And it's amazing because if you remember, there's a person who actually attempted something similar, which was Richard McCoy. Now, Richard McCoy robbed a plane, hijacked a plane, $500,000, jumped out, talked about it at a bar, and got busted. They came to his house, found the parachute, found the money, and he spent some time in jail. Well, guess what? Shantae and Rick, which are uh, their kids, Karen being their mom, believed that he could have been the person who committed these crimes. So they found this parachute. And on this parachute, there were some very specific items. Now, these very specific items were related to um, special designed items, certain designed elements within the chute. Now, when they took the parachutes, remember, there were four chutes. One of them was left behind, one of them was completely destroyed. One of them had the money wrapped around it, and then the other one was put on. The sports parachute was the one that was dismantled and left behind. The two custom army chutes were the ones taken, and then there was a third chute that they had pulled the strings out, wrapped it around the money to make sure that if he dropped it or whatnot, that it would stay together. And so one chute was totally unaccounted for. They found remains of what they believed to be a chute some years later, after the 8-year-old boy with his father were walking along the beach and found some old money. Now, why is coins and collectibles talking about DB Cooper? Well, because if you're not aware, you can actually buy the old paper money that is all disintegrated in PCGS holders. So you can actually buy graded uh, serial numbers that are listed as DB Coopers. They also have a list. Now, the list has since disappeared. So you can't find all the serial numbers, but a good friend of mine, he's actually in this chat right now, Gary Huffman, has a book, and in the back of this particular book, all the serial numbers are listed. Now, you can go look at this book. You can check it out from the library. So if you're really interested in looking for bills, you can check those out. I want to thank Gary for giving me that book to kind of look at it. But I saw this article today, and a buddy of mine, Chewy Doc from YouTube, a good friend of mine in the real world, said, "You want to look at this and maybe do a video later on after you can do some stuff." And I said, "No, no, 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 no. This is too cool. I want to drop this live." So the FBI had the parachute and they have the harness. And again, they tucked it away. They've had it. It's been sitting around Oregon, Utah, for God knows how long. Well, they closed the case in 2016, and they just decided recently they were going to quietly reopen the case. Well, we know of that because of what happened in January. So in January, again, they pulled out the tie, they ran some forensic evidence against it, found some DNA, looked at some little particles that were on it, traced it back to a paper and some metal that were there, and kind of tracked it back to a certain area. They believed they knew who it was, but they never stated who their idea of who it might be. Um, but this is kind of a seal the deal. So the original parachute was tied or altered by a guy named Earl Cossey. Now, Earl Cossey, excuse me, was a veteran skydiver, and this veteran skydiver was the one working with the FBI in creating and designing these parachutes to make sure that there were certain markers, certain elements, certain identifying pieces that would allow the oh, I might not be streaming. I think I might be froze. My edge just froze. We'll see if it stays up. But I might be froze. So I'll have to wait and see. Um, but Earl Cossey was working with the FBI. Unfortunately, in 2013, Earl Cossey was murdered in his home. And so they don't really have an expert to go back to. Unfortunately, it's one of these things where they have to look. What's cool about this is that um, this particular case borders the mythical, borders the mysterious, right? It almost is better to go unknown. It's almost better to go unsolved simply because if it goes unsolved, then there's going to be no way in which anybody can really definitively say that. However, this parachute issue is most likely going to kind of throw a kink in that. I'm really hopeful, and I think I'm locked up. Hold on just a second. I think my computer's just locked up. All right. Do you guys still have me? Let me know if you're there. I had some technical issues for a while. Yeah, so can you guys see me okay? Are you guys catching me? Let me know that you guys are here. I had to shut this browser down. Hopefully it's still up and running. Just put something in chat. Let me guys know you guys are back. Okay. Yeah, so here's the thing. Okay, good. Sounds good. Sorry about that. My browser froze up and then I lost everything. So here's the thing. They said that the person obviously was misidentified as far as age. And so the comment that's being made right now by Yankee Doodle Stacker is that the person would have only been 27 instead of 40. That's absolutely correct based off this information. And if you look at the general time frame, that would have been some of the information that they did. So here, let me pull this again. Hopefully I can do this without it crashing on me. So there were some uh, some items made. Let me pull this up. Just a sec. When I close this, I had to reopen it up and I lost my spot. So give me just a second. I apologize for the technical issues. I should have restarted. I always hate when I don't start. It is a huge difference, but again, if you look at there's if you have somebody who hasn't taken care of themselves for a little while or they haven't shaved or anything, it's very easy that somebody can look a lot older than they do. If they've had a hard night of drinking, for instance, and they go in, they could look pretty gruffy. That could add a number of years on. You put glasses on somebody, you put a nice hat on somebody, put somebody in a nicer suit. There's a lot of ways to make yourself artificially look a little bit older. We see this with women all the time, right? You see the 16-year-old who looks like she's 25. So again, there's a multitude of ways in which people could have deferred their looks or done something to make himself look older. Now, what's going on here is they've looked at the information and they look at um, Earl Cossie. Okay, here we are. I'm back to where I needed to be. So he was working with the FBI, and what they did is they started to look at some of the items that were there. Now, there were things with the setup. Now, again, there's two different pieces here. I'm going to see if they'll open it up and actually give all the specific information. But there was something about the particular setup that he had altered, shifted, adjusted, marked. Um, how true it if the kids are not, I don't know. But again, um, there's something in the way that the harness or the strapping was done that if you look at some of the information that's on this particular harness, if you stage it and set it up a certain way, it'd basically be virtually impossible for somebody else to mirror something that nobody else knew about. So how would they have set that up? They'd either had to one had access to the previous one, or two they would have to have the second one. Hey, Jack Gallman, how you doing? So for them to duplicate this would almost be basically like impossible. Not only did McCoy potentially pull off the DB Cooper piece, if you remember, years later he did it again. This time over the Arizona or over the Utah desert. Same type of plane, same exact situation, same exact scenario. If you look at the information that was there, and you look at some of the descriptions were a little bit different, but the general build, the general bulk of the man was the same. Again, just different appearance, different person, different time, maybe the way he talked to somebody, maybe his mannerisms. Again, if these were military-based people, they're pretty good with, language and talking to somebody, and they can sound older than they are because younger people usually have a different way of speaking. So the mannerisms, the way he did his face, the smoking, having the drink, having the money, he was sliding it across. Again, there's a lot of different reasons how they could have mistaken the age. That's not uncommon. The thing that I find fascinating about this is that they actually have a parachute, same type model, same exact setup that has that alteration that was done by the gentleman who was murdered in 2013. Now, I think it's kind of ironic that he would be murdered in his own home, being the only person who can identify this. Maybe there was something that was going on, and there was information that was coming out indicating that they had found like the harness or something. So there was specific information. I don't know the answer to that, but I think it's really ironic. This case has been basically silent as far as the FBI goes, and then here we go, January. We have this tie issue. We have a narrowing of situations that they don't tell people about. And I look like I'm buffering. I think I'm having an issue and I don't want to reset. So bear with me if I cut out. But now all of a sudden we have this story come out that we have the information. Again, people have sued for information on the tie and they've said no, FBI is not releasing that information. So here we've got a new opening of the case. We've got new information found on the tie. And now we've got this setup that's like 100,000 to one that anybody could ever replicate this without fully knowing what this guy had done. And it's produced by his family members. Oh, by the way, it happens to be a guy who also pulled this off. Oh, by the way, it also happens to be a guy that was smart enough to break out of jail. So, I mean, this guy had a pretty nefarious past. He had shown a number of times that he was capable of pulling off some really good maneuvers. He was militarily trained. He had jumped out of planes. He knew how to operate it. He had done low altitude jumps. He had done fire-based training stunts. Now, we talked with um, Gary Huffman when I did my original one, and he came in on the second one, and we talked a little bit about, what's going on with the story, what's happening, and he talked a little bit about some of the training that he's done and some of the areas that he's done. And one of the questions was like, well, he fell into the water, and Gary's like, well, that's not a big deal, right? It's not a big deal because we train for that, fully dressed with boots on, full pack, full ruck. How do you get to shore if you happen to fall into a body of water? How do you happen to land if you're sliding through a set of trees? They all train for that kind of stuff. Um, oh, it might be because it's, let me hide the chat overlay. I'll just do this. Hopefully that helps. You'll probably see the chat below here, but I think the chat overlay is going to be more of a pain in the butt than it is any good. So again, when we look at those particular items, when we look at that particular setup, there's too many variables that just align. And I know that Gary and I have talked a number of times about this case, and it just seems too coincidental that this person, proper training, would have been able to have been in the right place, the right time, match the general concept and the general build, match the information that was now minor age differences. And again, we talked about the number of ways in which that could be uh, considered or dismissed simply because of the mannerisms, the way he carried himself. Maybe he was unshaven for the time frame. 27-year-old, very nicely dressed, briefcase attaché, um, talked very cleanly, was very polite. There's a number of things that kind of indicated people would have thought he was older than he was. I know as a kid, I always had a little bit deeper voice. And when I would call my mom at work, they would say, "Hey, man, mom, excuse me, there's a man on the phone for you." It's like, it's probably my son. They're like, "No, this is a man." And I wasn't a man. I was actually, skinny little boy, but I had a very deeper voice and I knew how to talk. I was very elegant in my speech. So a lot of people mistook me as older than I was, in some cases, much older than I was. Now, when they seen me, sometimes that wasn't as evident, obviously, because I didn't look very old. But again, mannerisms are enough. So if I would have dressed myself nice and I would have went in maybe a little bit unshaven and I would have carried myself a little bit different, I can absolutely see how people would have mistaken the age for this. But what really gets me about this particular story is the fact that you have somebody who worked for the FBI. The FBI has these uh, modules. They have these items where they go back through and document everything. They've got an extremely huge case log and case record of this particular item. So when you look at the story, all of a sudden one appears. It matches a configuration, a known configuration, specifically melded and matched by the FBI during that time frame. It happened to be turned in by his family member who for many, many years just kind of sat on it, hid it. Now, maybe they put the money away. Maybe he used it to buy the house. Who knows what he did with the other money? Now, there are reports, and I don't know how true this is, but if I remember correctly, there are actual serial numbers in the $20 bills that had been found in normal order. They were confiscated by the FBI. I don't believe any of them are still in circulation, but the FBI did publicly release after a time all of the serial numbers. And in that, some of those items had actually been identified. I don't think that those are public. I don't think anybody has those. I do know that during the time frame, the grading companies had actually been tasked and targeted to look at some of these items and some of these elements to help them identify whether or not these were actual serial numbers. And so there are people who would call in, they would look at it, they would look through items. If they happened to see one, then they would report it, and then they would get confiscated by the FBI. So I believe, if I remember correctly, and again, I might be wrong on this, but I believe, hey, Everyday, what's going on? I believe that there were a number of these $20 bills that were actually found in circulation, spread throughout various areas. Some of them were actually located up in that area. And again, talking with Gary, you talk with the old pilots who lived in or around that area. There were a number of people who had seen him in the bar. There were a number of people who had experienced that. There's tons and tons and tons of lore in that particular area. Him coming out soaking wet, getting a car, having a friend pick him up. Many stories matched, many stories collaborated. And the people who seen him in the bar, the descriptions didn't exactly match the description of what was given at the airport, but much more closely represented what you would have known by looking at Mr. McCoy. So again, there's too many considerations here that just kind of to lead me to believe with this new advent that I think we've actually found who DB Cooper is. Now, again, why is a coin channel talking about DB Cooper? Well, I've done 2 stories on this, 2 videos. If you haven't seen them, go watch them. The first one was really good. The second one was just a follow up, talking with Gary Huffman. Now, Gary Huffman, again, has an absolute, I look about 60 now. Thanks, brother. Gary Huffman has a really good insight because he was special forces. He jumped out of planes. He worked with hot shots. He jumped out of areas in that specific area of the country. He's known to land in water, trees, you name it. He's done all of that. So he has a lot of information in that particular realm. So he was a great resource. And again, sent me this really cool book, and I had the serial numbers listed. Gary, if you're watching, again, thank you very much, but you can put anything you want in chat to help people know exactly what they're looking for as far as that book goes. But again, this information came out, and it was just, there's just too much information about this. Again, one of the biggest thing is McCoy paid somebody in his nearby town, which they found a fingerprint on the, I think it's the ransom note, I think was the other piece that they found. Again, they raided his home, found that he had pulled this off. They matched that serial number to the other one. And so they were able to kind of pair him with that. Again, there's just so many things that allow this person to be identified as DB Cooper. I think this information, while not all the information is out yet, I'm sure there's going to be a release of information publicly from the FBI as they confirm some other pieces. Unfortunately, the person who put these together are not going to have to look at this configuration based off of photos and documentation from things that happened, man, 50 years ago. And so there's going to be a lot of circumstantial evidence that has to happen. Some of those things that still have to come about. But again, a lot of great information about this. I wanted to do a follow-up. I seen this. Again, thank you, Chewy Doc, for sending me the information and, letting me come up and have this opportunity to talk to you guys again about what I believe is a fascinating story. And it's not just a fascinating story because it's the only technically unresolved hijacking in FBI history, but it might be solved. And so for many, many years, it remained a mystery. It remained quiet. It remained something of folklore. There's a bar every year during the date in which this happened. They have a party, and people religiously go there dressed up as DB Cooper and have drinks, and they look at stuff and they talk about the various stories. And as people get older, people have passed away. So a lot of the personal stories that people would bring have been passed on to others. And so the stories morph, the stories change, but it still lives on in tradition. So if this case is solved, what's that going to do to that? Is it going to continue? Are they going to be conspiracy theories still saying there's other people involved? Absolutely. Some of the people that have been hassled for being the person who have done this, are they going to get apologies? Like, what's going to happen for some of those people that have been accused of being DB Cooper and have been hassled for years? So again, if this proves to be true and they can actually point it and find the final piece of evidence to absolutely confirm that Floyd McCoy is the indeed DB Cooper, it brings a lot of questions as to what's going to happen after the fact. So anyway, folks, I wanted to bring you this, share this information. Again, I'm going to be sharing this in the description down below. There's a couple articles here that I'm going to be sharing with you. Again, I want to say huge thanks to Gary Huffman for all the information and for coming on the previous stream. But as I get information, I like to give you guys updates. And I figured, what the hell? Why make it a video? Why not do it live and just chit chat with some of the people out there on a late Monday night? All right, folks, someone needs to teach Harbor Freight how to load trailers. Well, I can't help with that, but if there's a mystery behind it, we're talking about money, then maybe I can get some information on you. Gary Huffman, I honestly believe that story, DB Cooper went into Mexico to live with his brother, is partially true. And I think the ransom money was laundered through cartels. That's why the money is so hard to find. Could be. But again, there are so many of these stories. This parachute matching the configuration. How difficult is that? Especially when nobody really knows what happened. Now, could there have been other people involved? Could there have been a split of people? Could this have been more than one person that was gained in, and some of those people did separate, maybe go to Mexico? Maybe there was a change of money. Maybe there's a change of hands. There's also a rumor that the money was used in cash to put a down payment on a house. So there's a lot of different rumors that are out there. But again, the likelihood that this is true, well, I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But it's pretty convincing evidence. And again, for after so many years, 8 years, of a case being quiet and silently reopened, there's something to that. The FBI has found something, they know something, and I think they're going to dig into this. So this is just another piece of recent evidence in 1 year that has come out that the FBI had been quiet about until now. So I think it's fascinating. More to come. I want to continue to monitor this story. If you guys are interested, and please do me a favor, put something in chat. Let me know that you guys like this. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. I wanted to keep this simple and short. But again, thank you all for your time. Thank you for coming in and hanging out with me. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. And folks, I will see you guys in the stream.